Let's define trauma and talk about a few types of trauma. So trauma results from the exposure to an incident or a series of events that are emotionally disturbing or life-threatening. So again, that are emotionally disturbing or life-threatening that impacts an individual's functioning, including their mental, physical, social, emotional, and spiritual well-being. So let's dive in a little deeper into 3 different types of traumas that you may or may not be familiar with. So acute trauma. Acute trauma is the trauma that is experienced once. It is an example of this would be being in a car accident for the first time. It doesn't happen again. It happened once, and that was the only time it happened. That would be acute. But now let's say you get into a car accident and it's the second or third time. This would be considered a chronic trauma. This is a trauma that is experienced more than once over the course of time. But it's similar in the sense that it was a car accident or it was in the same type, similar kind of area of trauma. So that would be chronic. Complex trauma is trauma that is layered. So it is maybe an acute trauma. It could be several acute traumas. It can be chronic trauma, various different kinds of trauma that are chronic, and it is layered. So they're not separated from each other. It's kind of difficult to determine what experience has impacted the other or has impacted someone's emotional, mental, social, physical well-being. But what I want you to know is that when we think of complex trauma, it is trauma that is layered. So there's more trauma on top of each other. Therefore, there's a lot more healing and wellness that is essential and needed if someone has experienced complex trauma. So again, I just wanted to share a little bit about these different types of traumas and let you know that if you are looking for support for maybe a one-time experience, a chronic experience, or complex experience, we at Indigenous Circle Wellness support folks on their healing and wellness journey, and we invite you to receive services from us if you are here in the state of California. We provide services throughout the state of California and virtually as well. We also do workshops and trainings talking especially about these topics around trauma and how do we heal from trauma. So this video is just an introduction to what trauma is, but please stay connected with us and learn more about different types of trauma, how it might impact you, and the ways in which you can receive healing, wellness, and a thriving future. I'm coming back to share a bit about take 7.5. Time is 9:45. Vicarious trauma. So I want to talk about vicarious trauma. It is one that folks may or may not be familiar with, and I think it's so important for us to know about it because this is the actual trauma that I imagine, especially with technology, with television, especially with social media, that we may be experiencing the most. And vicarious trauma is a trauma that we are experiencing through our senses in different ways. So what we are seeing, what we were hearing, what we are experiencing through maybe someone else's experience. This might be things that we're seeing online about a war that is happening, or seeing families being torn apart from the various experiences here. So let's talk about vicarious trauma, which is a trauma that I don't know if folks are fully aware of. And I think it's honestly one of the most important to understand because it's the one that impacts us probably the most without even realizing it. Vicarious trauma is a trauma that we may not be experiencing ourselves. We're not in the actual situation that's happening, but we may be witnessing it. So through our senses, through hearing, hearing and seeing, we are then experiencing the same visceral reaction of what a trauma experience is. So our brain and our body is still experiencing the trauma response. Therefore, vicarious trauma is something that we also need to be mindful of. As providers like myself, as a therapist, where I hear and I witness stories and information regarding trauma, it is important that I take very good care of myself because that trauma can very much have an impact on me as well if I am not doing the things properly to ensure my own well being. So, vicarious trauma is definitely something that is increased in certain professions that someone's line of duty or line of work requires them to see an experience of someone else that can then in turn be an experience that we might have for ourselves or we might experience internally. Our body and our mind will experience it the same way. So that is another type of trauma that is very much real, and we typically would see this in different types of professions, but we're also seeing that today very much so when we're consuming information online, especially through social media. So it's so important to be mindful of what you are exposing yourself to and others to, because vicarious trauma does still give very much those signals of trauma being experienced by yourself. It's the brain understanding it and input of trauma that you might be experiencing, and therefore you will have a trauma response or a stress response from that. So, one trauma to just be mindful of, and I hope you have a little bit more understanding. And please take care of yourself out there in the ways that you can, because vicarious trauma can have lasting impact.